One of the most popular elements in interactive documents is slideshows. They are engaging, very simple, and they can contain highly visual content. They also solve the fundamental question of having a lot of content in a very small amount of space. Whereas before in the video where we talked about buttons, we created a navigation that went from page to page, increasing the amount of pages that a document would contain. Slideshows through what we call multi-state objects will allow us to maintain all the content into one single page. Think of multi-state objects as an array in programming languages, where we have one gigantic variable that can contain all kinds of variables inside it. So a multi-state object can contain several objects inside it, and each one of them will occupy its own space within that multi-state object. So how do we go about this? What you're looking at on the screen is you have you have a background here, which is just an image in the background, and then I have these 4 buttons, which will call 4 different types of bags that I'm going to be creating through a multi-state object. The buttons are just straight out buttons. Nothing's been added to them. If you look at the settings, the properties for the buttons, I've only named them. That's all I have done. I just created a name for them, but I haven't added any actions or anything else. So now with that done, what I want to do is I want to bring in the content through which I'm going to be creating the multi-state object. To do so, I am going to import 4 images of bags. I'm going to create I'm going to bring in a blue bag, a green bag, a gray bag, and a red bag. So those are the images. Notice that they are PNGs, and that is because they have transparency settings. So when I click open, they will all be attached to my cursor. And then when I click and drag, I'm going to be defining the spacing for them based on the first image. Remember that I now have the ability to use my arrow keys on my keyboard. The arrow keys, the up one will create horizontal subdivisions. Vertical subdivisions, sorry. Or if I use the right one, it will create horizontal subdivisions. So I decide how I'm going to be laying them out. In this case, I'm going to be laying them out horizontally. So I just clicked on my right pointing arrow 3 times to create 3 extra spaces. And then when I let go, each image is inside its own box, inside its own container. So now what I want to do is I want to align them all to the blue one. So with them still selected, I'll click on the blue one to highlight it to make sure that it is the one that has the thicker outline. And then I'll just go ahead and use the left align and top align to make sure that everything is aligned. All 4 images have been aligned. Then I'm going to be pressing my Control and Shift keys on my keyboard. And then I'm going to click on in the corner handle, and I'm going to wait until it turns white, and then I'm going to start increasing the size of the bags so that I can actually see a larger image. Then I'm going to place them somewhere that looks okay within my app. Now, as you know, I have 4 images stacked up in here, the 4 images that I had brought in. So now I am going to use this button as navigation to navigate amongst all of them. To do so, what I want to do is select all of those images, that whole stack of images that I brought in, making sure that they're still selected. I'm going to go to the Object States menu over here. So the Object States menu is the one that allows you to create what we call a multi-state object. So to create a multi-state object, once you have selected the items that you want within the multi-state object, you can go to this plus sign at the bottom of that menu to convert whatever you have selected to a multi-state object. So once I click on that, you'll notice what happens on the Object States menu. Right there, you'll see that basically each one of the bags was pushed into its own variable or into its own space within the array. Think of it that way. And then it gives me the ability to give that multi-state object a name. In this case, I am going to call this bags. That's the name of my multi-state object. You can have as many multi-state objects as you need within your presentations. What that means is, think of this from the perspective of a portfolio piece. So if you're creating your own portfolio, you can have a multi-state object for images, for let's say photography, another one for illustration, another one for video. So you can have several multi-state objects within one single application. And then obviously you name each one of them independently according to what you are creating. In this case, this is only bags, and they're going to be called by these buttons. And I want to rename each one of these states, based on what it's contained within that multi-state object. So if I press the Shift key on my keyboard while I click on the name of each one of these states, the name gets highlighted, and then I can change the name. I'm going to name this one red bag. I'm going to go to the next state. You'll notice that as soon as I select it, my image changes on the page, and then I can press Shift and click on that name again. I'm going to call this one gray bag. And then I'm going to click on the third one, Shift click on the name. I'm going to call this one green bag. And last but not least, I'm going to click on the blue bag, and I'm going to name it blue bag. Okay. So I have renamed each one of my multi-state objects. They all have their own name. By default, the first multi-state object to show, the first state to show in the multi-state object is whatever's at the top. And if you don't want the red bag to be it, then you can go ahead and click and drag it elsewhere within the stack. And you'll notice that whatever happens to be at the top now is the gray bag. That's what's going to show. So it's your choice as how you want these things to appear within your multi-state object. You can always move them around. With that done, that's set up the multi-state object, and you'll notice that there's a little icon here that indicates that it is a multi-state object. You see that little icon matches the one right next to the name in the menu. Now, at this point, I want to start activating each one of these buttons to call each one of those states within the multi-state object. However, let's say at this point I figured out, oh, you know what? I forgot to add text to this, descriptors. I want to add a text to this saying that this is the red bag or the name of the actual bag. Let's say this bag is called the Red Dragon or something like that. So I want to create a text box, and I'm going to type the word Red Dragon. That is the name of the bag, of the style of the bag, and I'm going to change that to a color. I had created this brown, and by the way, to create a new color, all you got to do is click on the menu here, and then go to New Color Swatch, and then define the color that you want. So whether you want to choose it, by if you have a specific number that you're trying to match from a guideline that you receive from a client. Let's say if they have their own color scheme for whatever you're creating, then you can go ahead and enter those values here for RGB or for CMYK or Pantone colors. If you have, different options from here, from the drop-down menu, so you can choose what color format. However, since we're working on screens, RGB should be the default. And with that done, once I have defined the color, I can always click on Add, and I can either name it myself to give it a name or use the values from my RGB. I prefer to use the values because that way at a glance, when I'm looking at my color palette, I know what the values are, and I can key them where necessary, avoiding me having to try to match a color or using the color dropper. However, you can also use the eyedropper if you want to. So I can go ahead and click Add, and you'll notice that actually, let me make this a little darker. Match that, and maybe a little bit more pale. There you go. That's more like one more of a maroon. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add, and that will add that color. Click Done. It will add that color to the color swatches at the very bottom. As you can see, it is right here. And it will also, because I had that text selected, it applied it to it. Let me go ahead and increase the size of that so we can see it. And there it is. So I want that text to appear right here with the first bag. However, you'll notice that they are separate. How do I move that text into that state? Well, remember, everything that we are creating is still based on the principle that this program is a print program. And as such, the layers are still active. So if you go into your layer where everything is contained, in this case, layer 1, that's where everything is contained at this point except for the background, which is on layer 2 down here. So if I go to layer 1 and I uncollapse that layer, you'll notice that I have the red dragon, which is this thing, the title that I had created. Then I have a multi-state object called bags, which is my multi-state object. And if I click on the little blue button here, it will get selected. And I have my buttons, my blue button, my green button, and so on. All of these are buttons. So I can always expand my multi-state object, my bags multi-state object. If I expand it, you will notice that the first or default state is what's available to you. Now, if I click on the gray state over here on my multi-state object, and I go back to the layers, you will notice that now on the layers, I have displayed the gray bag. If I click on the green bag, you'll notice that it's now the green bag. And if I click on the blue bag here on the multi-state object menu, it shows the blue bag. So I can control each one of them independently. Now, what this does is basically the red bag is the container that contains that image. Remember, red bag is not the actual image itself. It is the container, the frame that contains it. So if I expand the red bag option here, in there, I do see my image. Now I am at the level of the image. If I click on that, I have selected the image. This container, that's the state, and that's where I want to place that text into. So to do so, I can grab the text from the stack in the layers and drag it under that red bag option. You'll notice that as soon as I get underneath it, it sort of indents to the right. That means it's part of the state now. So when it indents like this, watch, like that, that means if I let it go, it's going to be part of that state, the red bag state. And you'll notice that now they belong to the same state. If I turn off the red bag state visibility, both the title and the image disappear, which means that red dragon title now belongs to that specific state. And if I move that state, notice that they both move at the same time. So it's almost like I grouped them by moving them on the stack under the same state. You can do the same thing for all the other ones. Now let's go ahead and activate the buttons for the multi-state object. So to do so, I am going to close my layers and my multi-state object menu, and I'm going to open up my buttons menu. I'm going to select the first button, and I'm going to tell it what action to do when I release. The trigger, the event is going to be on release. Then I'm going to click on actions, and I'm going to open up from this. I'm going to choose go to state, and notice that that is under EPUB only. So like I said at the beginning, this action EPUB, this action will only be available for non-reflowable or what we call fixed layout EPUBs, and to publish online, meaning for things that are going to go to HTML5. That multi-state objects are recognized by those two file formats. But if you're talking about interactive PDFs or reflowable EPUBs, they're not recognized by those two formats. So not for interactive PDFs or reflowable EPUBs, but for fixed layout EPUBs and for HTML or online content, they do work. So right here under EPUB only, I'm going to look for go to state. When I do that, notice that my menu will automatically change down here, and it tells me where do you want to go? What object are you looking at? What multi-state object? So you choose, since we now only have one called bags, that's all we have as an option. And down here, it gives you a visual of what the states for that object are. Since I'm activating the red bag button, I'll choose the red bag. That's where I want to go when I click on that button. I'll do the same thing for the gray. So if I click on gray, let me go to the actions, go to state. For the red bags, let's look for the gray bag. There it is. And if I click on the green one, drop down menu, go to state, choose the green option from the state from the bags object. And then for the blue, same thing. Go to state, choose the bags object, choose the blue state, and we are set. Now with this done, let's go ahead and try the interactive preview. I'm going to click on that, and on goes my application. And if I click on gray, I switch to gray. If I click on blue, I switch to blue. If I click on red, I switch to red. If I click on green, I switch it. So it's non-linear. I can go ahead and use this non-linearly as opposed to the back and forward buttons that we were using in the past to go from page to page. Therefore, this makes more, it gives you a lot more flexibility on the amount of content that you can have in this amount of limited space. That is how you can work, the connection between buttons and multi-state objects. Now, in a later video, we're going to see how to actually add animations into these multi-state objects so that I can add things that are moving on the screen or that are fading in, as I call them, by using buttons. And that basically puts together things that will provide the user with affordances and signifiers that will indicate what to do and make the presentation as a whole a lot more engaging.